Hello everyone, Mike with Spray Jones, getting into video 3 of our 4-part series on spray foam to roofs, to cathedral ceilings, cathedralized attics. In the last 2 previous videos we've covered to vent and not to vent in a cathedralized attic system and the sense that both of those make. This third video will be a continuation of the cathedralized attic system, but a more in-depth view of what physically and thermally is going on with the roof system and what design considerations do we need to be taking when we're going to be putting this all together. As always, I want to say thank you to everybody that has subscribed, joined the channel, laid out a comment, and has decided that they're getting something out of this. Thank you for the feedback, thank you for the instruction, and just thank you for listening to what I have to say. Alright, on to this video. I think it's worth noting here, as we get into this third one, that there's 2 different types of moisture problems that we're dealing with. The first is your external moisture. That is not the spray foam's fault, and that is not the spray foam's responsibility, open cell or closed cell. Any moisture, rain, from the exterior, snow, has to be dealt with by your roofing material and your roofing installer. So whether you're going to be using shingles or shakes, tiles, rubber roofing materials, or metal roofing materials, the responsibility is on your roofer and the roofing material first and foremost to create a waterproof barrier to the exterior and deal with any moisture that may or may not get past that barrier in a safe and proper manner. End of story. The internal vents that normally would be in an attic are there to deal with air leakage and the moisture that would be on the underside of the roof deck due to the warm air coming in contact with something cold. Now, I have seen in hot climates where conditioned cool air comes in contact with a very hot roof deck and they have moisture problems dripping out of lights due to the reverse. The inside is cool and the attic is hot. Or you can have a cold attic and the inside is warm and there's your condensation. So we are not placing ventilation between the spray foam and the roof deck to deal with an exterior moisture problem. Anybody that's telling you to do that doesn't understand what's going on. So you cannot sit there and say that the failure of the roofing material is blamed back on the spray foam, because the spray foam is not doing anything to waterproof it or to keep the water out. That is not what we are doing. You do not put your waterproofing to the inside. So any conversation of somebody saying, well, the spray foam held the water up against the roof deck and accelerated the problems is flawed logic and flawed understanding of what the system is doing. If you have a roof leak, if you have a compromised system on the exterior, it's going to wreck your roof regardless of whether the spray foam is there or not. Now, thinking that you need to let the leak get through your insulation and wreck your drywall and wreck your interior finishes and leave stains on your interior so that you can look up and say, oh, look at this, water stains, water dripping through my ceiling. We must have a roof leak. To say that that's how you want to identify roof failure, to me, is really, really flawed. So I just do not subscribe to the old way of thinking that I need to have water making it through my roof, through my insulation, through my drip rock to tell me I got a roof leak. I want to have the best membrane and waterproofing to the exterior and flashed properly, installed properly. Then I want to back that up with the best possible insulation, and the whole system is going to work as one monolithic piece. If I have a roof leak, if I have damage to the outside, I want it to stay at the outside. I don't want it wicking through the entire truss system. I don't want it coming into all of my insulation. I don't want my attic completely soaked. I don't want it carrying on throughout my insulation for months on end before I ever realize it. I want to keep it and hold it to the outside and have it localized to where the damage was at the breach. I hope this makes sense. This is what you get when you have a spray foam closed cell roof system. We reviewed the comment from the other person in the last video that had open cell foam. The roof leakage was minor, not enough to come all the way through the insulation to the interior side, and they only managed to discover this on some sort of a roof inspection. They didn't need to rip the roof off. They didn't need to rip all of the roofing materials up. They dealt with it in a very different way, and a logical and sensible way. So understand that waterproofing and dealing with your exterior roof is job number one for your roofer and your roofing material. The interior envelope has no bearing on that. So we don't add anything and we don't take anything away from what the outside stuff has to do its job. Now, what products would you and should you and can you be using with the spray foam open or closed cell? Well, you can use just about anything, really. The asphalt shingle market is sort of dying out. The fiberglass shingles are now the better product to be choosing from. Shakes are really good if you can afford them. Tile is really good. Rubber is really good. Metal is an awesome product. Standing seam or what have you. If you're putting metal down, yes, there should be some sort of an underlay underneath it. Usually you're going to have what's called a diffusion open membrane that's placed underneath, and then the metal is laid down. That way any water that gets past the metal is going to drip down that drainage plane and out and be gone. Now, what about those of you that are building a structure and for whatever reason the metal deck is going to be exposed? Well, I don't want to see a membrane between the metal deck and where I'm putting the spray foam, because we've gone over in video 1 and video 2 that we want a tight, intimate contact bond of the closed cell or open cell foam directly to the underside of the roofing material. If you go and install a membrane and the membrane is not tight, it's loose, it's baggy, there is a chance that the spray foam is going to grab onto it quite well and pull it and contract. When it's contracting and cooling, pull it in all sorts of different directions, and then you can create a gap or a void between the metal and that membrane. And now you've created little pockets all over the place where if water gets past something, it can pool and sit and you don't know about it. So I do not like membranes to the underside of metal. And the argument of, well, we want to be able to remove the metal. Folks, no. If you're trading a what-if problem for almost a guaranteed problem at that point, you could have a serious issue with the foam and gravity pulling and creating some voids you don't know about. Whereas tight, intimate contact with the metal and getting the foam up to proper thickness to control condensation, have proper insulation, I'll take that any day of the week. And if I ever have to replace it, well, I'll be on an insurance claim at that point and I'll deal with it that way. But I don't want to reincorporate an issue if I don't have to. So that's the sense of that. Now, can we make the roof too tight? Yes, it is entirely possible. Normally, so we have our terminology sorted out here, a 312 pitch is considered low slope. So 312 and anything flatter. So that means a 3-foot drop in 12 feet of run. So most people are going to consider a flat roof to be anything that has got 112 or 212. It's never ever perfectly flat. It always has to be sloped. And the minimum slope that most insurance companies are going to want to see is 1/2 inch in 12 feet. Now, most products these days that you can get on roof underlay, you're going to want to be buying what's called a diffusion open membrane. Now, what that means is that the product is not fully shut moisture tight, so that any moisture that is captured inside the roofing material, the plywood and the OSB, can diffuse back out. Now, so we understand the moisture in bulk format, whether it's air leakage or rainwater, that's where 98 to 99% of your water is coming from. So rain from the outside, or from the interior side, it would be air leakage. I covered that in my vapor barrier video. And we saw that in the previous video, the first one, where we showed the amount of air leakage going through a vapor barrier creating the problem. So if you have 98 to 99% of your moisture problem being air leakage, the remaining 1 to 2% is going to be what diffuses through the materials, through the actual foam insulation itself and the roofing material. So you understand how small this is. I've shown you on many occasions that We rate things in Canada in nanograms. I talked to you about 60 nanograms being 1 perm, right? Anything under 60, so 58, 59, right, is a vapor barrier. Well, 1 nanogram is 1/1,000,000,000th of a gram. So we're talking about a very, very, very small amount of moisture in diffusion. Again, 98, 99% of your moisture is found in the air leakage or the water from the outside. So diffusion open membranes are going to allow that 1%, 2% to diffuse back out. It's also going to be in spec with natural building material drying times and moisture retainment times. And anything where you want to go to an ultra low slope where you might want or need an absolute zero, then that's going to be written by a design professional. So OSB contains a little bit more moisture versus plywood, so a lot of professional engineers and building envelope design are going to want to review the products that you're using. For sure, do a membrane review. They're also going to want to do a final inspection and stamp a lot of times. So if you had a 112 pitch roof and you wanted to put a very aggressive membrane on the outside that wasn't diffusion open, then your design criteria is going to be from your professional jurisdiction person. They're going to write the specification of membrane, what plywood or OSB to use, what thickness, and what thickness the foam is going to be. And then they're going to seal it, and then they're going to provide it to you, and that'll be the final authority in your jurisdiction. A lot of times the building code official is not the final authority. And this brings up a really, really, really good point. Again, we've talked about R values. We've talked about the frustration of having to put spray foam to higher and higher values like it's fibrous. Then you guys need to get going on design criteria. You would deal with a building envelope firm. They would provide you with the specs on roofing materials, truss design, how much spray foam, and if you get somebody that is advanced in their thinking with new products and has more advanced software systems, they're going to write the recommendations and the specifications for what you should be using and how much and where. And if they know what they're talking about, then they can sit there and seal it at 3 inches or 3.5 or 4, and they can give you your equivalency ratings, and then you're off the hook when it comes to having to play this R value game. You present to them the engineering report, it's been sealed, and your building code inspector, that's what they're going to approve, unless they're just an absolute ignorant person. And that's really the way that you need to go. And it's the way that it's going to have to be dealt with for quite some time until we can get rules and laws changed. Now, what about using something like the zip insulated sheathing? Like people throw this out all the time, R6 or what have you. Yeah, it's awesome. It's absolutely great. I don't see any reason why not to be using it. It's the same that we do with the walls as we do with the roof. If you want to lay down an R6 to the outside on top of the trusses and then get all of the joints sealed up, put your vapor diffusion open membrane on, or then put metal or put shingles or whatever you want to do for your roofing material. That's between you and your roofer. That's great. Then you can build up the requisite amount of 3 or 4 or 2 inches of closed, or 4 or 5 or 6 inches of open cell foam, and you've got a great, great system there. Now, if you're going to go open cell and you've already got the zip system, I think that's going to need a little bit of additional review. Again, get your professionals in your neck of the woods, in your state, in your county, in your province to review what you're doing and write it so that you know that you've got everything taken care of. I do think that you can potentially put something on the roof that on a long-term basis could cause problems if you took absolutely no account to what I've just been saying. But it would take 20 and 30 years for it to show up. It's not going to show up in the first 1 to 2 years or 3, even a decade. It's going to take an enormous amount of time for something to break down. And even then, I don't know. With modern OSB and plywoods and the glue contents and the adhesives that we're putting into things, I don't know how well it would break down and how fast. But I'm not interested in my career tempting things. So what about roof leaks? What do we do if and when roofing materials fail? Again, the primary barrier is your flashing and your shingles and getting a drainage plane and getting it gone. But if it has damaged your exterior roof underlay, your plywood, your OSB, that can be replaced. It's not the end of the world. If it has compromised it so bad to the point where it's become somewhat mushy on top, well, closed cell foam is going to back that up and make the whole entire roof deck strong. So I don't think you're going to get much deflection out of the closed cell foam. But if your 7/16 sheeting has become squishy and it needs to be replaced, it can be cut, relief cutted, and then pried up from the foam, which if it's squished, it's not going to be too difficult. The foam can be touched up with a do-it-yourself foam kit. A simple non-solvent based adhesive would be placed over top of the surface of the spray foam, spread around with a putty knife or something like that, and then your new sheathing would be laid down, and then your new shingles over top of it, and you'd compress the whole mixture and tie it in. I have been doing the spray foam non-vented system for 16 years of business. The only time we've had somebody that's needed to replace shingles due to water damage was where two intersecting valleys were, and the valleys were not detailed out properly by the roofer, so the water was running sideways underneath. Again, asphalt shingles, not fiberglass. The shingles deteriorated over about a 10-year period. They needed to be replaced only in the valley, and the sheathing behind it was soft. So they called me, and they relief cut, they pried it up, they touched it up exactly how I said, they glued it back down, and they put the new piece in, weaved, and put a proper ice and water shield into the valleys. So other than that, we have not seen people that have normal operating shingles that have had damage due to water that caused extensive areas that needed to be replaced. I had one gentleman that lost a lot of shingles in a windstorm on a new home. It had nothing to do with the spray foam. It had to do with the fact that his roofer did not use the right type of nails. Surprise, surprise. And they all blew off in a very high windstorm. So he was very concerned about putting new shingles. They ripped the entire roof off 100%, was totally taken off. It did not cause irreversible damage to the foam, especially on closed cell foam. If the water's coming in one of those nails, it's terminated right then and there. But then they laid down the new shingles. I don't believe he had an underlay at all. It just was shingles on top of OSB. And then they put the new product in. And I spoke to the roofers that were doing the work, and they saw absolutely no problem in it whatsoever. In fact, they comment on how strong the roof deck is when they're walking on it with spray foam behind it. It's just absolutely rock solid compared to a roof that doesn't have it. So it can be re-roofed. Like, how many times in your lifetime are you going to need to re-roof anyhow? Let's be honest here. If you're getting the 20 or 25, you should only be, if you're living at that residence, you should be roofing it maybe twice. But if you go to steel, or if you go to rubber, or you go to some other products, they might be able to live and should live outside of your lifespan, and that's a good thing. So I really don't see it being a huge problem with exterior water damage and having to replace them. Now, on to this sort of quick review of frost lines on the roof and what have you. We've got a dedicated video to this. I know it's got music in it and people have complained, and it will get re-edited, but let's take a look at some simple explanation as to what's going on. Because if we laid down the zip insulated sheathing, we wouldn't see the lines on the roof. Not like we are, because you'd have similar density of insulation and wood over 100% of the roof surface. Likewise, if you had metal roofing over top of your standard roof, you wouldn't see it either, because it's going to be spaced up and off. It's not going to transfer the heat through to the metal roof the same way that it would with shingles that are in intimate contact. So let's just read some quick explanations. There's a dedicated video to this that you can watch, so I'm not going to go into it extensively here, but let's just look at a really good couple of answers. So a natural phenomenon that occurs with the spray foam non-vented roof system in cold weather climate is to see strips, tiger strips, frost, no frost where the rafters line up, and then frost where the spray foam is. Weak thinking concludes that this is merely a heat loss from inside, and that therefore there's not enough spray foam over the top cords. And I've explained to people in the other video that it has nothing to do with 1 or 2 inches less of foam. You couldn't solve the problem with 2 feet of foam. It has to do with the thermal mass of the lumber, and the only way to remove it is to have consistent density or consistent mass of lumber over the entire surface of the roof, or to space your roofing materials off the deck so that there can't be a direct conductivity transfer. And I want to just read the 2 comments on the spray foam roofing and lines video, because they say it about as concise and as professionally as it can be said. This comment comes from this gentleman here, or a person here. Interesting observations with spray foam roofs, but one could see something like this with non-spray foam roof as well. That is absolutely true. Before this is over, I'm going to show you a picture of the reverse happening, given right conditions. I've seen this uninsulated garage roof. The Stefan Boltzmann Law, which is heat flow equation law that I referenced in the video, states that every object emits radiant heat, also known as infrared or long wave radiation, as a function of its temperature, as stated in this video. In this example, there is 2 different thermal masses, wood plus roof and foam plus roof at the surface, regardless of the thickness of the foam and ambient conditions inside the building. Correct. And most likely of different temperatures at the surface. As such, the surface along the trusses are emitting radiant heat differently. An infrared camera would show the differences in surface temperatures. The difference would most likely be the greatest at early night due to the accumulated heat by the sun during the day, and would dissipate overnight as the roof surface temperatures would equilibrate. If this constant in surface temperature would not dissipate overnight on an infrared camera, then it would be an indication of heat transfer, heat loss through the trusses. Bang! Absolutely. It charges up, it dissipates it out, and then it resets the next night, and the next night, and the next night, and it keeps going on and on and on. And I've had people phone and tell me that they hired competitor or somebody else, and that they've had them back 2 or 3 times, and they've sprayed more foam, and they still can't get it to go away. Yes, so do not text me, do not message me, don't send me a comment telling me that this is insufficient insulation and that we have sprayed more, that it would have gone away, because I'm just going to ignore you. This is from a guy who uses the handle fish on. I like this guy. We were going back and forth. He was asking questions, and so we pick up the conversation. It says, "Hi, think you misunderstood me, but what I'm saying is the same thing you're saying at the 3-minute mark in the video. Stefan Boltzmann Law. The T in degrees Kelvin is part of the equation. So what's happening is the roofing material with frost is not the same temperature as the roofing over the truss. It's cooler. Your foam is doing such a good job that the wide sections with frost are colder than the truss ribs. No heat is escaping from the inside." Yay! I agree. A well-insulated roof has all the snow still on it. That's what people think. The T in the equation, the temperature is higher on the roofing over the truss. It's warmer there and frost is not forming. The wood truss has stored heat, yes, and is also conducting heat better than the insulation, acting as a bridge if not insulated well. So to minimize this thermal bridging, what they call it, the best thing to do is encapsulate the wood truss on the inside with insulation, which we do. Yes, some heat is already stored from the day's radiation coming down from above, from the sun. So you will see this stripe effect most when the difference in temps is greater. So the faster the temp drops in the evening with the right humidity, of course, the faster the insulated wide sections of roofing lose their heat and frost over, while the heat sink trusses are still giving off heat. Correct. They have to release what's in the battery. You won't see this too much in the morning if the trusses are surrounded by insulation, which is what I was saying in my post above. Good job explaining things. Very cool. Fish on, Bachelor of Science, Physics, 1981. So I'm not going to go into the roof lines any more than this. The roof lines can't be removed by spraying 1 to 2 feet extra of foam insulation on the inside. The only way it can be removed is what I said at the beginning. Exterior density is the same thing across the roof deck, or space the roofing materials off. This is not a problem, folks. This is not you causing the shingles to heave and causing all sorts of problems. It's just showing you where the emissivity is coming out of the stored energy in the wood, in the lumber. And it's not a detrimental fact to your roof. Now, in video 4, we're going to get into snow load and how much snow do you keep on a roof, melting, ice on a roof. Do spray foam roofs look the same as a conventional cold? They don't. Why don't they? Are they behaving worse? Are they behaving better? If we have icicles coming off the sides, why is it? How hot does the roof deck get? We're going to get into all of that in video 4. I've got some really, really solid anecdotal stuff to show you, real world stuff from a lot of different videos. Now let's just take a quick look at a picture. There you go. There's the reverse. Frost where the ribs are. This is a completely uninsulated garage. There's no insulation in the walls or in the roof. You've got the standard mushroom vents. And look where we're getting frost. We're getting a lot of frost on the vented overhang. We're getting frost in the chute, the vented chute. And then we're getting frost developing with every strip of every roof rafter. The top cords, you can actually faintly see it going this way. Right, because these have gotten cold. They're staying cold. The outside temperature is starting to warm up. So the thin 7/16 sheeting is starting to slowly warm up. And you're not going to be seeing the frost is developed in these areas. As the sun comes out, this will eventually re-equalize and warm up and melt and it'll all be gone. But look at this. This is not an insulated system. They're not losing heat. What would you explain here on the overhang? Why would you get frost lines on the roof with the overhang? You're seeing exactly what we talked about. The nighttime emissivity and the stored mass in the lumber and what got colder and what didn't. So, photographic evidence that it can happen with the opposite vented system. So the number one disadvantage to this system is by far the amount of square footage of insulation that you're going to be putting on compared to flat. So when you've got a 12-12 pitch, a 10-12, an 8-12, there's an enormous amount of area there compared to the flat ceiling over the building or residence. So the number one disadvantage here is going to be the added footage that you're trying to insulate. But we're doing that to gain the cathedralized attic space, and we're doing this so we can get the cool attic in the summer, the warm attic in the wintertime, and pick up the advantages that that's going to bring in the building. One place where I will turn down spray foam in the attic is if we are doing a multi-family condominium unit or something like that, and there's going to need to be a lot of sound control between suites. The cavernous attic is going to be not good to try to control sound. Sound needs to be on the sheetrock and stopping the noise from going from suite to suite to suite. I do have a few people that have had foam in their homes and said, well, you know, the kids' bedrooms are over here and our bedroom's over here, and it has been louder. They have noticed that they can hear things because it's only the drywall that's stopping it. And they've solved that problem simply just by putting rock salt batting over top in the attic, over top of the ceiling areas for each bedroom, and just using that to dampen down the sound waves and what they're hearing and how much. Now, let's just discuss the amount of cubic footage here. Most people, when they look at this, absolutely roll their eyes and say, oh my goodness, this is going to cost me a fortune to heat. I have a dedicated video to that. It's an older video. It's done with the lesser specs and voice and everything like that. But in that video, I go over the amount of footage and the calculations about cubic feet and how often it needs to be heated. And I'll just briefly summarize here, and then we'll get into taking a look at some stats. It's not the amount of cubic footage of heat that you have to warm or cool that determines largely your bill, because once you charge that space up, you're good to go, provided you can provide a very low air change per hour rating inside the building. So it's not the amount of footage, cubic footage, it's the amount of times per hour that you have to recondition it. Now think about a conventional system. Why were we venting it before? We were venting it to deal with air leakage that brought moisture into the attic. So who's paying for that air leakage? You are. Who's paying for the attic to warm up? You are. Who's paying for the attic to cool down? You are. We've seen the studies from Oak Ridge National Labs on the attics, that the attics do not perform as well in super high heat loads. The insulation's efficiency is lost by as much as 50%. That's going to reflect in your heating load and your air conditioning bills. Same thing in the wintertime. Enough cold air going through the attic space, you're not having an effective insulation. So I have seen it in 16 years of business that the spray foam system to the underside of the roof deck, non-vented, consumes less energy than the fiberglass system blown on the roof deck, even all the way out to R50 and 55. The fibrous materials are so inefficient and lose so much heat and allow so much air and allow so much moisture to pass through them that we kick their butt all day long with the closed cell or even the open cell foam to the underside of the roof deck, despite the fact that we've got more footage to deal with, cubic footage to deal with. If you find that hard to believe, let's go check out a simple piece of information that I had from a person that got spray foam. So, simple context here. This person has a brand new home built. It's on a crawl space. It's a 2-story home, a 712 pitch or 812 pitch roof, and they have actual storage space in the attic. There's lights up there. You're able to walk. There's plywood down. They took possession of the house. We're in the first year. They noticed a few deficiencies, so they were addressing this with the builder, and we got rolled into it because of some of the things that they were seeing, which we were able to address and explain to them. But this person was very, very detail-oriented, and they had constructed this. They had thermal sensors. They had temperature. They were measuring the temperature and the humidity levels of both indoor and outdoor. So here he's got January the 8th, 2017. It's minus 21 degrees Celsius outside. It's 76 degrees relative humidity. His office temperature at the sensor on the second floor is 23 degrees. And they have it 15%. Now they're running the HRV constantly in the first year to bring down the overall humidity levels and solve a few other issues that were going on at the time with the new home. I won't go into any of those details, but it is what it is here. He's got 15% RH. Now look inside the attic. 24 degrees and 16% relative humidity. So people have said to me, well, you're going to have to vent the attics and bring all this air in and distribute the air. You're going to have humidity high or low. Otherwise, no. He's 1 degree. He goes up a little ladder and up inside the attic, and I think the sensor inside the attic was right at the top rung. He had it positioned right at the top of the peak, just down below the spray foam. And this was spec'd with 3 inches of closed cell, folks. Yeah, no kidding. 24 degrees inside the attic, 23 in his office, and all the way downstairs in the crawl space, it's 1 degree warmer, 25 degrees centigrade, and 14% relative humidity. That's amazing. Right? And I think the only reason that the crawl space was that much warmer is that's where a lot of the duct work was to distribute. The mechanical equipment wasn't in there, but the ducts ran through a lot of the crawl space and then came up vertically through the chases that they had built for him. Here he's got February 6th, 2017. He's got a minus 15 degrees Celsius day, 83% relative humidity outdoors. In the attic, it is 22 degrees that day and 20% relative humidity. In his office, it's bang on. It's 22 degrees and 18%. So we got a 2% relative humidity change between the attic and the office on the second floor. And then down inside the crawl space, which is titled basement, again, it's 1 degree warmer. It's 23 degrees and 18% relative humidity. So this holds true to the fact that it is not drastically warmer and not drastically cooler in the attic space, cathedralized attic, and it's certainly not a totally different humidity level. There's minimal amount of air movement within this attic space other than what will naturally equalize through convective loop. It's not airtight. They got the chain, they got the door that drops down, they got a nice wooden or aluminum ladder that comes down. You get up inside there, there's plywood on the floor, lights. They had a whole lot of boxes and storage items. It was a great place for storage, like I've been telling you, but you are not going to see drastically different temperatures, and you're not going to need to see drastically larger heating loads or cooling loads to deal with the added cubic footage, because you don't have a super hot attic, you don't have a super cold attic. The insulation is working at maximum efficiency. Your sheetrock put up is just a suspended ceiling at that point. It's a point in space to look at, and once the building gets charged with air, cool or warm, and you maintain that airtight structure with 0.8 or 0.3 air change per hour, then you've got a balanced heating system. And we're going to get into that now, and that's going to be we're going to close now with attic equipment and heat loads for homes with spray foam. Now, I have not seen the attics cost people more money to operate. And here's a testimony from somebody that goes by the handle AV. They stated that they have 2 almost identical homes in Savannah, Georgia, built by the same company. One has a spray foam attic, other is fiberglass. The spray foam one is much more comfortable, and the AC runs a lot less at the same temperatures. See it all the time, folks. And if we cost the people far more to operate and they noticed a huge increase in overall op costs, they wouldn't be able to keep selling the spray foam. So I've shown you from the details before of those pictures of the temperature in the attic and the humidity levels. The attics are not at a substantially higher or in the wintertime lower temperature than the thermostat. I've always told my clients 1 to 2 degrees thermostat temperature. And they usually are maintaining the same humidity levels. Air, if you've sprayed the roof deck and you've sprayed the walls and you have a foam box for your structure, whether it's commercial or residential or what have you, the space is going to equalize based on what the HVAC makes it. Where you place the drywall after that really doesn't have a huge bearing on separating out temperature level and humidity level. So once you've gotten the entire structure sealed up, again, the amount of times per hour or day that you have to recondition that air is a problem and will lead to increased costs. So when you don't have an attic that's 140 degrees inside Fahrenheit, when you don't have a freezing cold minus 20, minus 30 degree Fahrenheit attic in the wintertime, you're not trying to have huge temperature differentials of hot or cold being separated by your thermal insulation. So as a result, the structure can stay more balanced and more equalized. If you are getting a spray foam structure done, commercial or residential, I really recommend that you have a balanced and designed HVAC system. And the leader in this in America is Richard Rue with Energy Wise Structures out of Arlington, Texas. Energy Wise Structures matches custom and proprietary software that they have built to understand proper R values for foam insulations, both insulated concrete form, SIPS panel, rigid wall systems, and of course spray foam insulation. They are a huge advocate of the spray foam non-vented attic system for the express purpose of having ductwork and mechanical equipment that it can't otherwise go elsewhere in the structure that needs to go through the attic space in order to be distributed, utilizing the non-vented, sealed, and conditioned attic space. But what they really do that is brilliant is they balance the humidity levels, they balance the cubic footage, they balance the BTUs and the tonnage necessary based on their modeling of load. And they take into account the direction of face, the amount of windows, the square footage. So they have a very comprehensive understanding. Now, if you don't balance out the HVAC system, chances are the HVAC is going to be massively oversized because all of the tables and slide rulers and old charts that the HVAC guys are using are all based on outdated abacus type technology. They're going on X amount of square feet and heat loading. They're not basing it on proper envelope design. Even the Hot 2000 software and some of the more modern heat loading softwares, unless they have an understanding of the actual R value fallacy, this is where you run into a problem. They're going to treat an R20 bat the same as R20 spray foam. I'm not saying Hot 2000 does, but I'm saying there are programs like that that do. So they've got to take into account air movement, thermal seal, thermal efficiency, thermal inertia ratings, and you need proprietary people and their software to balance these things out. Now, I know there's other people out there besides Richard Rue and Energy-Wise Structures, but he has probably been tip of the spear, first in the industry to do these things. We have some local HVAC companies that can balance systems fairly well. They're not in Richard's category of brilliance, but an oversized system can create problems because it's designed to remove humidity and bring you up to temperature. If you're going to reach temperature settings before you reach humidity settings, then you're going to have a moisture buildup problem inside the house. So in order to be comfortable, you have to control, first and foremost, humidity level. Second, airflow. And thirdly, temperature. And you do all of that through a balanced system working in conjunction with, not independent of, the envelope. So get your systems balanced. Guys, any of you people that are wanting to use foam and take advantage of lesser code values, like get the spray foam down on the amount of code requirement, get your systems designed, engineered, get the HVAC engineered, get the envelope engineered, and then have it in complete package sealed and say this is what's being installed, and it's designed to work in conjunction with and in concert with all the other components, and then you have the absolute best product and building that you possibly can. And isn't that how it's supposed to be? I mean, if we can design jet airliners and spacecraft that can go high up into the sky and fly at hundreds of miles per hour, thousands of miles per hour, how are we not freezing cold? How are we not sweating? And I do not subscribe to this the house can be too tight myth. No, the house should be tight. You should have an absolute perfectly air-sealed envelope to the exterior, and then you deal with the conditioned space. You bring in fresh air. You ventilate on demand. You control the humidity levels through the engineering and the mechanical engineering. Isn't that what we're supposed to do? We're not supposed to let Mother Nature breathe the building for us. All right, so on to quickly wrapping up here in the next 4 minutes, HVAC in the attic. Well, this is a no-brainer. We don't put our furnaces and our air conditioners and our ductwork in the attics in Canada. We just don't. We usually have basements and crawl spaces, and then we bring the ducting through there. But we have had situations where there's been homes with slab on grade or a commercial building that's slab on grade, and they have no choice but to bring the ductwork through the attic. They'll put usually the furnace and the mechanical equipment elsewhere in a mechanical room, but the ducting to get to the rooms is through the attic. Absolutely. Spray foam works perfectly for that. Of course, you want a conditioned and non-vented attic space where everything can be run and you can get at it and you can service it and you don't have to move insulation in order to get it accommodated. Plus, you can deal with the attics, trunk lines, add one, take one away, move one, check out, see how it's working, have full access to it the whole time. If you are putting mechanical equipment, the furnace, the water heater, the air conditioner into the attic, there's going to be a lot of code jurisdictions, including the one we have here in Canada, that are going to require a thermal barrier over top of the spray polyurethane foam. If that's the case, there's two ways to beat it. You either pony up the cash and spray the thermal barrier on the spray foam, at which point you've just paid for all this foam to go on. Now you got to pay for all this thermal barrier to go on. Very cost prohibitive, very, very negative. But what I get clients to do is if there's going to be an area for the mechanical equipment, we get them to compartmentalize that, build a little room up in the attic with a floor and walls and a roof. And we have that gyprocked or paneled or what have you to create the thermal barrier. And then we have rough openings cut, ductwork put through it, return airs, supply, everything comes in and out. Carbon monoxide detector, smoke detector, all of the detectors are in place, and then all of the penetrations through the walls are resealed up with can foam and what have you. And at that point, we've had the code inspectors treat that as a standalone area that is meeting the thermal barrier requirements, and then the rest of the attic space or crawl space, this would apply to crawl spaces, doesn't need to be spray-on thermal barriered, and that's probably the best way to go when you're running your equipment up inside there. I've just not seen it where we've gotten all of the equipment installed, whether it's in the attic or elsewhere, and then the heating loads have just been out of whack. In fact, most people just cannot fathom how little the home consumes. And I'll just give you a really quick example. We sprayed a house under renovation. They gutted the house. They sprayed the walls. We sprayed the roof, and then the basement. And they put in a high-efficiency furnace and did a full-on renovation. And when they put it back together, they weren't consuming hardly any electricity or power. So the power company wanted to come out and change the meter. The gas company wanted to come out and change the meter. And when they finally kept asking them why they'd come out 2 and 3 times to change meters, they said, well, you're not using anything anymore, and the meters obviously have to be broke. And they said, no, the meter isn't broke. We did a major renovation. We had spray foam added and then a high-efficiency furnace. When they finally figured that out, they left it in place as is. And they had 10 months of credit to use up in that house. And this house is like 1,200 square foot bungalow. So I just don't see how adding the cubic footage in the attic space is going to throw you off by a huge, huge amount. So in video 4, we're going to take a look at the melting and more external with water and finish up any remaining topics that we're sort of missing. I thank you for making it through to the end on these longer videos. I appreciate it. Remember to click like and subscribe. Share this with somebody that's on the fence or saying foam's no good. And we will catch you on the next one. Bye.